Okay, good morning. So today's topic is uh, ergonomics and user interface design. So ergonomics, to understand the context of what we are going to discuss, is all about how you interact with the system and considering your health. Like for example, considering your position, body position, when you are working, how comfortable you need to be with. So this ergonomics is a topic that discusses about all aspects of how you can comfortably uh, deal with a computer system as a human being without any stress, without any pain, in a very smooth manner. How do you interact with the system? So in that terms, from the system's point of view, how does uh, a system needs to be designed in a way that it is comfortable for a human user. Right. Just 1 minute. Right. Ergonomics or human factors is traditionally the study of the physical characteristics of the interaction, how the controls are designed in the UI, the physical environment in which the interaction takes place, and the layout and physical qualities of the screen. That means the sizing, right? So we have mobile screens, we have computer desktop screens, and again desktop screens we have different resolutions, right? So in these three aspects, how the controls are designed, how the physical environment is suitable, and the screen layout, these are all discussion under the topic of ergonomics, right? So we'll be discussing about these factors. So primary focus is on the user performance and how the interface enhances or detracts from this. In seeking to evaluate these aspects of the interaction, ergonomics will also touch upon human psychology and system constraints. So human psychology and system constraints. System constraints mean the system limitations or the boundaries which the system can maximum support for this smooth interaction. Okay. First, we'll discuss about arrangement of controls and the display nature. So we can, when we are designing a user interface in a software or in a website web form, when you're using HTML, any of these front-end technologies, you can go with like fundamentally like three types of arrangements. One is functional controls. Functional controls and displays are organized so that those that are functionally related are placed together. That means if you have some functionality to do, so uh, you may have a, let's say, for example, in an application form, you may have a field called when you are filling name, address, etc. And then you have a field called sex. Then you have this male, female, right? So these normally you use a radio button. But when you're using a radio button, now functionally those are two related, right? I mean, you have male and female, which should be together. I mean, it should be close to each other. Then only it's easy to go and click the either option. If you have male in one place and female in maybe after several lines, then you can't say it's functionally related because these two are should be more close to each other. So in that case, we call them functional. Similarly, you may have buttons. Now, you might have noticed in this Word applications or any of these other applications, this clipboard functionality. Now, cut, copy, and paste are always grouped together, right? You don't have cut in one group and paste in another group. These three will come under the clipboard because these are related functionalities. So that's what we call functional controls. So we have to decide when we are designing the user interface, functionally related stuff should be close to each other. Right? That is one type of arrangement. Another arrangement could be sequential controls. They are organized to reflect the order of their use in a typical interaction. So there might be a set of work you might be doing in a user interface that after one, then you have to do the second step, you have to do the third step, fourth step, like that. So we have a sequence there. In those kind of things, you will have to arrange it in that kind of an order, right? Now, for example, let's say, yeah, there could be a situation. Now, in this example, they are given right in aviation systems. That means this aircraft. Now, in these aircraft systems, they may have all the buttons in a kind of an order where the pilot can use the arm in a orderly manner. So he will start from the top, then he'll come to the center, then he'll come to the bottom, something like that. He will keep on. So the button sequence will be there in a particular order. So they know which one to do first and which one to do next. Sometimes you might have seen in the some websites also, some forms when you're filling, you have this step 1, step 2, step 3, and then finally you have the submit button, right? So that kind of arrangement we call, if we arrange two controls in that order, we call them sequential controls. Then another arrangement could be frequency. Frequency means how often you may be using a particular button or particular control that is there on a form, on layout, right? How regularly you may use, right? So frequency control displays are organized according to how frequently they are used. The most commonly used controls, the most easily accessible. Now, for example, this cancel button, right? OK and cancel. First of all, they are functionally related because like you do or you don't do. So those two should be together. But again, if you have a cancel button, it will be normally as the first button, and then or maybe it might be the last button, so that you quickly can go and everybody knows where the cancel is, right? You will have a consistency. Or this minimize button, maximize button, right? Having a minimize button, maximize button. You can think of many things in a web form. Maybe you may need to have a link or a common place for the home page. When you click on the logo at the top of the page, it should be if you are in any page, you should be able to go to the home page when you click the logo. So like that, certain places you can have frequency controls arranged in your design. In addition to the organization of the controls and displays in relation to each other, the entire system interface must be arranged appropriately in relation to the user's position, right? For example, the user should be able to reach all controls necessary and view all displays without excessive body movement. So the previous thing what we discussed was all about the interface oriented things, right? Whatever the arrangement of the UI controls. But here we are discussing in addition to the arrangement that needs to be done, right? So if a user is going to come and use the controls in your screen without any excessive body movement, that means from, let's say, you can't have a button here and you can, if you have another button somewhere here related, but it is like you're making the user stress and come to this point and do something if they want to do quickly. They have to spend time here and there, or maybe they have to keep on clicking or double clicking, places wherever they want to do something quick. If it's going to take a lot of time for them to do that, that is not a good design. So that needs to be taken into consideration. Right? Another one is critical displays should be at eye level. What do you mean by critical displays? Like, for example, important information. Now, you might have seen notifications. Normally, they come at the top. Now, if you look at Facebook, if you're using Facebook or some some systems, you have messages inbox coming at this right upper corner, right on the top of this. What they're saying, so those are like critical displays, because like if you have those things somewhere in the middle, imagine in a design, those notifications when you are browsing the website, and if it comes suddenly in the middle, I mean, it is kind of a bad design, or like it is very odd, like you're doing something important. Issues. Critical should be visible at an eye level. Lighting should be arranged to avoid glare and reflection, distorting displays. That means sometimes people use very bright background, or maybe very dark background with not proper font colors and all. So that will bring issues for the user. Control should be spaced to provide adequate room for the user to maneuver. Right? There should be consistent and enough space left between the controls. Now, for example, if you have OK and cancel together here, which is functionally related, but if you don't have a proper space between them, so a user who is coming and trying to click on the mouse, sometimes by mistake, instead of clicking OK, they might click the cancel, or the other way around, if it is very close together. Imagine if it's a touch screen interface. So maybe in the mouse you may have an accurate thing. You may, even if it is very close, you may be very careful. But the same thing you cannot expect if you are converting a screen to a touch interface, because touch interface, you are going to use your finger. So finger needs enough space from one button to the other. That's why you might have noticed in the banks and all, or any touch screens you have seen, the ATM machines and all, they have very big buttons, very large buttons. Now, for normal computer interface, you don't need that kind of a big button. But considering the touch interface, because of human beings directly interacting, that kind of a large button or large controls are needed, because we don't know the size of the fingers of different users and how they will behave. Right? So those things need to be taken into consideration. Okay, we have two ways of users interacting with the system. One is direct manipulation, the other one is indirect manipulation. Now, in direct manipulation, as the name says, user interacts with the system and the system gives an instant feedback to the user. Instant means immediately system will respond, right? In indirect manipulation, what happens is user talks to the system. So let's say this is the user, the plant is like a system. So here they're giving an example of a manufacturing company or manufacturing plant. So if the user wants to operate a machine or some machinery here, instead of directly interacting with the machinery, he will go through an interface. So user will be talking to the interface, and maybe the interface will give an immediate feedback on certain things, but the actual operations, whatever the user wanted to do, will take some time and go to the destination, and then the system will respond. Even the response will come from the system after some time. So for example, an interface might be just giving you operation started. So for example, it will say immediate, so that's an immediate feedback. It will give a small message. But when it goes to the system, and the system has to give, so this is the real response, which comes from the plant or from the system itself. So that will take some time. So this is one thing, one nature of the indirect manipulation. Right? So that discussion is given here. The user being in primary control of the changes in the interface. The autonomous nature of industrial processes like this makes this an inappropriate model. In a direct manipulation system, the user interacts with an artificial world inside the computer, for example, the desktop. In this kind of a scenario, an industrial interface is merely an intermediary between the operator and the real world. At one level, the user must receive immediate feedback generated by the interface, that keystrokes and other actions that have been received. So as I told, small kind of responses will come here. Maybe you're typing something, you see the typed letters or typed information and maybe some confirmation messages, right? So those are immediate feedbacks. In addition, the user's actions will have some effect on the equipment controlled by the interface, and adequate monitoring must be provided for this. So for the rest of the actual work, there should be some monitoring activity that has to keep the user informed of what has happened, or something has failed, what is progressing, that information is needed. So we'll have to, mostly we might be in very simple applications, we might be using this model, this first model, direct manipulation. But in advanced systems, we don't actually have control over the backend servers, backend information. So we may have to deal with interfaces like this. So in that case, we have to make sure how do you do that, right? So you might have heard of a technology called, I think now it's still a bit old, Ajax. Now, when you are designing web technologies, how many of you know Ajax? How many of you have heard of Ajax? Do you know Ajax? Okay, let me see. There's a question. Can an acknowledgement and internet browsing consider as indirect manipulation? Acknowledge can be, no, acknowledgement, so it depends. So if it's an instant thing, you can say it's direct manipulation. Yeah, internet browsing can be, yeah, there is one part where you are directly involving, right? When you are doing a search, sometimes this, for example, let's say filters, you're using filters on websites. So when you're searching for some long list, you have a list of items and you're using the filters. In that case, maybe it might be a direct manipulation, but the full set of information that is loading for the first time, it might be indirect manipulation, because like you're just clicking on a button, you just have clicked the button, but the rest of the loading information has to happen through many back-end processing. So that might be indirect manipulation. So yeah, it's a tough call to say. Internet browsing experience, maybe you can put it under both category, but more likely it will fall under direct manipulation, right? Because you get some instant results. So what was I asking? Ajax. Have you heard about Ajax? Ajax technology? Asynchronous JavaScript. I can't remember the other word. It's a very popular one. Okay. So Ajax is basically the technology was introduced for the sole reason of, like, earlier days when people were designing web applications, always they relied on the server connectivity, right? For every response, they needed to connect to the server, and the user had to wait for something. But what Ajax introduced was like it took some part of the workload to connect to the server, but still the user will not feel the delay. So user will get a experience that they are receiving some information quickly. So it's like it's a another interface within the UI framework. So it's a JavaScript based technology. So some people still use that. It's still popular. Okay, so that is one thing. So you have to be aware of what is direct manipulation and indirect manipulation. Based on this kind of discussion and on some other examples we'll be discussing later, we'll visit a past paper question at the end of the lecture. Right. So keep this idea in mind. What is direct manipulation? What is indirect manipulation? Okay. So problems with indirect manipulation. The indirectness also causes problems with simple monitoring tasks. Delays due to periodic sampling, slow communication, and digital processing often mean that the data displayed are somewhat out of date. So mostly sometimes what happens is you may have done something through the interface, and maybe when you're receiving the time you're receiving the information might be very late. So sometime at that time the data might be also very out of date. So that is one point. If the operator is not aware of these delays, diagnosis of system state may be wrong. Right? Whoever is doing this, if there are any delays, slow communication things, and if the person who is using that doesn't know, so they have a wrong state of the system. These problems are compounded if the interface produces summary information displays. Right? Uh, so again, it's explaining the same problem. So if there are delays and you get some report a little bit late, that is going to be a problem. If the data comprising such a display of different timeliness, the result may be misleading. Right? Again, because of delay, if you have data displayed in maybe which should be showing 1 hour before, but it is showing after 1 hour late, maybe that is going to cause more confusion within the user environment, right? And the users will get wrong information. So main point I would say indirect manipulation is you don't get instant feedback. If you don't get instant feedback, there is a likelihood that you get delayed information or maybe wrong information, not at the right time, or you don't get the right information at the right time. Right? There is a problem with that. Right. Now we discuss the physical environment of the interaction. Right. So ergonomics under this topic. So where will the system be used? By whom will it be used? Will users be sitting, standing, or moving about? So these are some questions you have to ask for yourself in the context of your software, right? So this will depend largely on the domain and will be more critical in specific control and operational settings than in general use. So these questions are more, as they say, maybe simple applications. These are not very complicated, and you may use the standard way of doing things. But if you are going for more critical systems, or let's say more technical oriented systems, we have to keep in mind about the audience and their environment, what kind of environment they're going to use this. Right now, you might have seen like most of these fingerprint systems or ATM machines. So these are all like fixed on walls, no? And the nature of the interfaces are also like uh, it provides an intuitive interface where users don't have to stress out themselves. Either they can use single hand and do things, or maybe some places you might have seen they have a very lengthy keyboard where you can flexibly go and use your hands and type something, right? So how the physical environment in which the system is used may influence how well it is accepted and even the health and safety of its users. So it should therefore be considered in all design, right? So that is all talking about the physical environment consideration. Another thing is size of the users. When I say size, it's about short, tall, right? In any system, the smallest user should be able to reach all the controls. So that is the starting point in any design. The smallest user should be able to reach all the controls. This may include a user in a wheelchair. And the largest user should not be cramped in the environment. So for the very tall person case also, they shouldn't bend too much and try to do something on the interface. So we have to consider that. In particular, all users should be comfortably able to see critical displays. For long periods of use, the user should be seated for comfort and stability. Seating should provide back support, so the environment they are working. If required to stand, the user should have room to move around in order to reach all the controls. So why these things are important? Now that's why I say you may have considered the software side of things, and maybe for the eye visual purpose, you have done a perfect job. The system is perfect. But how the success factor matters also is in the physical environment, where that system is going to be installed and what is the physical arrangement of using it. So if that physical arrangement is not comfortable, your whole effort is a failure. People will maybe start blaming the software people because of a reason of not proper physical arrangements. So when we are implementing or when we are having negotiations with the customer, we have to also consider these aspects and get an agreement. Okay, if you are going to use this software, you need to have these physical arrangements, or you may need to have a this kind of a performing, let's say, with the proper hardware requirements and all those things. You need to communicate with the user, right, with the customer. Then only your software will be successful. Right. Health issues, physical position is a very simple thing. Now, users should be able to reach all controls comfortably and see all the displays. Users should not be expected to stand for long periods. And also, if they are sitting, they should be provided with back support. If a particular position for a part of the body is to be adapted for long periods, for example, in typing, support should be provided to allow rest. Now, that's why they say they don't recommend using stools. So if you are sitting on stools for a long time in the machine, it's going to cramp you. You are going to bend forward. It is going to affect your body. So the ideal position would be to have a nice back support here. Like that's why you have these standard computer tables and standard computer chairs, these wheelchairs with adjustable wheelchairs, right? The reason is because there may be short people, tall people. But if you look at the computer tables, all the computer tables that are manufactured will have a standard height. That it's 2.5 meters or something, right? I'm not actually sure about the height, but if you notice, there is a standard. So unlike dining table and these things, computer tables have a specific thing. Otherwise, you will have problems in these joints if you have like this. So be careful about it. This also applies, now these things cannot be controlled with a mobile phone when you're using, because those are anyway portable. But we have to be aware of our health, how we are going to use our mobile phones. So most of us have a habit of bending our neck and uh, looking at the phone, or maybe we lie down on the bed and maybe have our phone on top of our chest, or maybe we raise it for a long time, and then you may have noticed, I mean, I also have experience. You may also have that experience where your hands get kind of cramped, like because of the blood not circulating properly. You hold the phone for a long time, there'll be less blood circulation, and after sometimes like you feel tired, right? So those are very bad things when we practice those things, right? So in those cases, we have to take control. In physical, this desktop computers or table uh, tabs, we should be having these proper arrangements. So that's what we mentioned here. Temperature also matters. So although most users can adapt to slight changes in temperature without adverse effect, extremes of hot or cold will affect performance. In excessive cases, also health. Right? Experimental studies show that performance deteriorates at high or low temperatures, with users being unable to concentrate efficiently. So this is about the environment, the temperature of the room or place you're working. So if it's very hot, also you can't focus, and again, adding to the heat generated from the machines, you are not going to get focused. At the same time, the right opposite, if you have very cold temperature in the room with lot of AC, right? Then also you are unable to focus on your work. You will keep on always either rubbing your hands for the most part, and you will be doing less work, right? So we have to consider that. Lighting arrangements. The lighting level will again depend on the work environment. However, adequate lighting should be provided to allow users to see the computer screen without discomfort or eye strain. The light source should also be positioned to avoid glare affecting the display. Right? Glare means sometimes you get this reflection or additional light that comes from the monitor. What you need to avoid also is using laptops in the night or the screens in the night with the surrounding environment light switched off. That is a very bad thing, because you see only the screen, but your keyboard and all is not properly visible. Now that is not a good thing. For that, what you could have, at least you should be having a table lamp. Right. Now there are like uh, laptops I have seen that support this night mode as well, where you have lights appearing on the keyboard keys as well. So even if you switch off the light, you still are able to see your keys, because they have these LED bulbs blinking from the each letter, each character. That may be acceptable, but still it is better to avoid if you don't have the surrounding environment light, it is going to give you a stress after a long time for your eye strain basically. Then noise are also things that will affect performance. So you have designed the system, you have the physical environment properly arranged, you have the perfect lighting, but if you have noise in the environment, that is going to be a disturbance. Right? Obviously, excessive noise can be harmful to health, causing the user pain and, in acute cases, loss of hearing. Noise levels should be maintained at a comfortable level in the work environment. So this does not necessarily mean no noise at all. There can be noise. Noise can be a stimulus to users and can provide a needed confirmation of system activity. So here we could discuss this in two aspects. One is uh, environmental noise that could result in distraction. The other type of noise that comes from the system, right? um, so let's say if you have button click, and if you don't give a noise for the button click, sometimes you don't get that feeling whether you have clicked or not, right? So maybe you should enable the noise there, you should enable a sound there, right? So, but you shouldn't go for extreme levels. If you click on something and some alarm kind of noise is coming, that may be detrimental to the health. I mean, it will be very odd to see very large sounds coming from your software. So use the uh, appropriate noise for the relevant scenario and make sure it is comfortable for all the users. Okay. Right. Next thing is time. So the time users spend using the system should also be controlled. It has been suggested that excessive use of CRT displays can be harmful to users, particularly pregnant women, right? Uh, so again, it's talking about if you are going to do some task and it is going to take a lot of time, we have to make sure how our system can facilitate speed response. But again, if it is on the side of the user also have to take their consideration. So they shouldn't sit for long hours, maybe after working a full stretch for 40 minutes or 45 minutes. You should just, get up, go around, have a cup of coffee or wash your face, and then come back and sit. So that will relieve the uh, issues that you could get with your, spine or whatever things you're in your body, right? So spending time should be properly managed. Don't sit for long hours. That's the general advice. Okay. In terms of user interface, usage of color matters. So colors used in the display should be as distinct as possible. That means distinct means for the user it should be differentiable. One color should be differentiable to another color. When you are using uh, colors in approximation, that means close to each other, don't use similar colors close to each other. It will confuse the user, right? So distinction should be there. And the distinction should not be affected by changes in contrast. That means again the light levels they see. Blue should not be used to display critic because blue is like it's a different, it gives a different meaning. If color is used as an indicator, it should not be the only cue. Additional coding information should be included. Okay. So the colors used should also correspond to common conventions and user expectations, whatever people are already familiar with. So that kind of convention is better to follow. We know red, yellow, and green. Red is generally considered for alerts, stopping, those kind of things, right? So that's what they're saying here. And green is indeed normal thing, or like we give a signal. That's why you might have seen some websites when you're having validation error messages appear in red color. Normally that is the general norm. And anything successful, you might have seen buttons showing a tick mark in a green color, right? That is the norm. Yellow may be for like warnings, like let's say standby to bring some attention, kind of thing. So these conventions should not be violated without any very good cause. I mean, unless you have a different reason to not use this, to not use green, uh, we shouldn't change these already familiar conditions. However, we should also consider culture. There are different cultures. Now, we may be from our part of the world, like Sri Lanka and most of the Western countries, Middle Eastern countries, red is associated with danger and maybe warnings also in most of the cultures, right? But in China, that is a normal thing. They think red is happiness or good fortune. So that's why you might have seen even in the flag they have this red color, right? In Chinese flag. So for them it might be a normal thing. And also if you take about black and white, now some cultures black is used for the as the color of mourning. Mourning means during a somebody has died and you do a funeral procession, so people wear dress in black. In our cultures, I think people wear white color, right? Uh, so those differences, complete opposite differences are there in certain cultures. So when we are using some colors, and if we are targeting a particular audience, we have to take these things also into consideration, right? Apart from all the functionality you develop, how do you present it to the right audience matters with colors also. So awareness of the cultural associations of color is particularly important in designing systems and websites for a global market. So this is why you have to learn a concept called localization and globalization. In every software, you have this thing, right? So that's why you may have noticed they have this option called themes. Some websites introduce the themes, right? So when a particular user is visiting, if they don't feel comfortable with the color arrangements, they can easily go to the themes and maybe choose, maybe for example Chinese theme or maybe Middle Eastern theme. So when they switch that, they will get the whole layout, the color changes. It's just changing the CSS. You have already learned CSS, no? So dynamically changing the CSS through the program, through that. So that way we can attract a larger audience into our uh, website or the software we have produced. So these things are important. Right. Now we move on to interaction styles. Before that, any questions up to now? Was it all clear? Any questions? Okay. So straightforward stuff. So this subject we are learning here is more of discussion only, right? I mean, mostly for your part 2 kind of questions, where you have to discuss these matters in certain questions. Okay. So just get the general idea of what I'm discussing. That should be helpful for you. That should be enough, and you have to write it in your own style. Interaction styles. How do we interact with the system? Different styles. So in a computer system, in a user interface, we may interact with the system through a command line or through menus or maybe through our natural language, or we may have this dialog box kind of thing, question and answer format way, or we may have form filling types and spreadsheets like Excel or Google Sheets kind of interface. That's a different way of interacting. Then we have the general WIMP, window icon, menu and pointer type interfaces. Some are just point and click, and also finally 3D interfaces. Right. So command line interface is the most simplest way of interacting with the system, where you just rely on commands, as you might have seen. So it provides a means of expressing instructions to the computer directly using function keys, single characters, abbreviations of whole world commands. In some systems, the command line is the only way of communicating with the system, right? There might be no other interface. This might be the only way. More commonly today, it is supplementary to menu-based interfaces, providing accelerated access to the system's functionality for experienced users. Command line interfaces are powerful in that they offer direct access to system functionality as opposed to the hierarchical nature of the menus, and can be combined to apply a number of tools to the same data. Right? So they're just briefly comparing this interface with the menu one. Now, if you look at a menu, you have to click something, and that has to in turn execute a command. But command line is something directly you do with the system. So it is a more direct, it has a more direct nature with the system, right? If you want to copy a file, you just type the copy command and do the thing directly. Same thing if you're going to do with the user interface, graphical user interface, for example. Then you have to select the item, you have to select the you have to click the command there. That command will again come and do something behind the scenes. So that is like kind of less direct. But in command line, it is direct. Okay, one nature of this is it is flexible. The command often has a number of options or parameters that will vary its behavior in some way, and it can be applied to many objects at once, making it useful for repetitive tasks. However, commands must be remembered. That is one kind of a, I wouldn't say disadvantage, one drawback. From the user's point of view, they have to memorize the commands, right? As no cue is provided in the command line to indicate which command is needed. But now I think we have that. For example, maybe we have to memorize is one thing, but simply by typing help or maybe putting a question mark, you can get the information of which commands give, you can get the description. But generally, it is very difficult to remember all the commands. So it is more suitable for expert users, people who are very tech-oriented people. They will use command line rather than normal people. Novices means the beginners. So beginners will find it very difficult to use command lines. That's the point mentioning. This problem can be alleviated a little by using consistent and meaningful commands and abbreviations. So certain things you can control. Unfortunately, commands are often obscure and vary across systems, causing confusion to the user and increasing the overhead of learning. So if you design an interface, let's say command line interface, one is there from the system itself. But for your system, if you are going to rely on commands only, by typing commands only, people can use your software. That means like for expert users, okay, but it will also introduce more problems when people are going to move to other systems. So when they're going to interact with other systems, they will see less familiarity with using your system, because your commands here might have a different meaning from standard commands that are used, right? So that will introduce more confusion. In general, these are some issues that can be there. Next interaction style is using menus. So in a menu-driven interface, the set of options, as you know, are available to the user is displayed on the screen and selected using the mouse or numeric or alphabetic keys. That means we can use our keyboard and browse the menu, or maybe directly use the mouse to go and click and execute it. Since the options are visible, they are less demanding of the user, relying on recognition rather than recall. So they rely on recognition, familiarity, right? Not familiarity actually, recognition means because you are displaying it, we know what to do, like directly you go and do it. However, menu options still need to be meaningful and logically grouped to aid functions. Like often menus are hierarchically ordered, something like this, and the option required is not available at the top layer of the hierarchy. What does that say? Often menus are hierarchically ordered, yes, and the option required is not available at the top layer of the hierarchy. Okay. What they're saying is now sometimes one issue with this menu-based interface is now here no problem. You have it all directly listed here. But let's say you want to do there is some work you need to do. Menu may not be having it at the first level of this. You may have to go to the sub level. Now, for example, in the right click thing here, I wanted to get this pointer, for example. I'm using this laser pointer now. So I didn't get it directly here. I had to go into another sub level, right? So this is what they're saying here. Often menus are hierarchically ordered, and the option required is not available at the top layer of the hierarchy. So that is like they are discussing, that is kind of a limitation. Right? You don't see it in the first level. You have to go second step and then get something. So let's say I want to use ink color. I'd go here and then select the color. Right? So this is the point they're saying, or like a drawback. The grouping and naming of menu options then provides the only cue for the user to find the required option. Now some menus are there, you can't use your mouse. For example, in the BIOS screen, or like even in your SMS, for example, in your SMS application, you will receive some SMS to, send some number to this thing. You will get a menu when you are requesting this USSD code for some information, maybe star points or maybe, I don't know, whatever you're requesting from your mobile service provider. So they send a menu-based interface in the format of a SMS. As you type or send some information, then again they ask, okay, if you want this, go and type this number. So you rely on, you read the information, but you don't type cache, you type the number only as the response. So that is also a menu-based interface. Also this BIOS screen, when you start your machine and you keep on clicking delete, you get this BIOS display. There also, if you want to change different options, you have to rely on your keyboard arrow mouse and keyboard arrows and the enter key, right? So that is a different. So that is also menu, but the interaction way is different. So the grouping and naming of menu options then provides the only cue for the user to find the required option. Such systems either can be purely text-based, with the menu options being presented as numbered choices, or it may have a graphical component in which the menu appears within a rectangular box and choices are made. Perhaps by typing the initial letter of the desired selection or the number, or by moving around the menu with the arrow keys. So that is how menus are used. Natural language is understanding both of speech and written input is the subject of much interest and research. There are many developments going under that. Unfortunately, however, the ambiguity of natural language makes it very difficult for a machine to understand. So the syntax or structure of a phrase may not be clear. Right? So that's some limitations with natural language. When you're going to use commands or your voice, you have to take a lot of things into consideration. One is the external environment. The noise should be not distracting the this speech kind of systems. Then again, the person's accent, right? So person talking in India, Sri Lanka, and UK, US, Australia all have a different way of accent. Even though they use the same language, English, they have a different accent. So that will sometimes give it is a difficulty to do. It is not doable. I mean, there's nothing like it cannot be done or something like that. It can be overcome. There are a lot of systems now that understand natural language. You might have heard about this robot called, do you know this robot, that the most intelligent robot up to date? Anybody knows the name? It's a very popular one. The most intelligent robot developed up to date, who is also a citizen of Saudi Arabia. That robot is a citizen of Saudi Arabia, because Saudis gave citizenship. No idea. Okay. So these are things you should search and be aware of. I gave you the hint. No. Sophia. the robot. It's a humanoid. Looks like this, like a woman. There are a lot of videos she has entered. I use the word she because it's designed in a female voice and female appearance. She has attended a lot of interviews, lot of programs, lot of shows, and she speaks naturally and also understands any interviewer's accent. Now here in this video, you can search later. Uh, she was singing a song actually with the other person, with the host, right? It was really amazing. So it was, I mean, she's lively connecting to the internet and getting updates on a lot of different stuff. Um, she understands different accents, so that is a breakthrough information. Okay, let me go back to topic. So natural language, yes. Now maybe there might be still challenges. Now we have to think about how we can develop, Tamil or Sinhala understanding robots. So still it's a field that is developing. So it's basically the idea in terms of user interface to, understand that natural language is also an option that you can give for your users to talk to your system. I mean, to interact with your system, right? People who have disabilities, for example, who don't have hands. What is the option? If they are able to speak and they have visual things, their eyes are also okay. The only way of interacting with the software would be using natural language. So even if a sentence structure is clear, we may find ambiguity in the meaning of the words used. For example, the word pitch may refer to a sports field, or it may be a throw in baseball, I think, or it could be a waterproofing substance, or maybe a territory. So different meanings can be there for words when you're using natural language. So the computer system should be intelligent enough to know what meaning you are doing, what meaning you are trying to intend. We often rely on the context and our general knowledge to sort out this ambiguity, but it is difficult to feed this information to the machine. To complicate matters more, the use of pronouns and relative terms adds further ambiguity. So pronouns in English, like things that you add in addition to describe something, right? When you are adding more adjectives and stuff like that, it can complicate things more. So it's a very tough way to deal with the system, but it's worth the choice. However, systems can be built to understand restricted subsets of language. For a known and constrained domain, the system can be provided with sufficient information to disambiguate terms. It is important in interfaces which use natural language in this restricted form that the user is aware of the limitations of the system and does not expect too much of understanding. So you don't have to consider that much complicated stuff in all cases. If you can feed just enough information for the computer system to understand what commands can be expected. So whenever a user is using the wrong word, the system can respond accordingly and say maybe, please repeat the command again, or this command is not supported, something like that. So we have a restricted domain. That way we can make our system still work using natural language. Okay, the use of natural language in restricted domains is relatively successful, as we discussed, but it is debatable whether this can be really called natural language, because we are restricting. We can't purely say it is a natural language because we have limited words only to use, or limited language. So the user still has to learn which phrases the computer understands and may become frustrated if too much is expected. However, it is not clear how useful a general natural language interface would be. Language is by nature vague. Vague means doubtful and imprecise. If you have the wrong pronunciation, it's imprecise. This gives it its flexibility and allows creativity in expression. Computers, on the other hand, require precise instructions, because now human to human, okay, even if it is vague, we can think, deduce, and guess. This is what this person has told. Something like that we can guess. But computers need to have very clear instructions. Given a free rein, would we be able to describe our requirements precisely enough to guarantee a particular response? So these are some challenging questions we should ask. That means if we naturally go and try to deal or talk with the system, will the system understand it? So those are some challenging stuff under that. Next interaction style is question and answer query dialogue. This is a format we give to the user. Question and answer dialogue is a simple mechanism for providing input to an application in a specific domain. The user is asked a series of questions, mainly with yes or no responses, multiple choice, or codes, and so is read through the interaction step by step. Now, if you have used Google Forms, you might have seen Google Forms. Mostly, you have to fill some information, and you will be asked, options. Do you like this, or do you do this one? Like that, you have to answer yes or no. You will have radio buttons. So those kind of interfaces are called question answer query dialogue. These interfaces are easy to learn and use, but are limited in functionality and power. As such, they are appropriate for restricted domains and for novice or casual users. That means this is not suitable for maybe advanced people. These kind of interfaces can be provided for people who are very primitive, like people who don't know complicated things in the system. For them, maybe this kind of interface would be suitable. So query languages, on the other hand, are used to construct queries to retrieve information from a database. They use natural language style phrases, but in fact require specific syntax. Now, there are some other types of question answer dialog boxes. Now, things like you do on a database. You have a database, you want to get information database. You use a language called SQL, structured query language. So it has a format, and we are supposed to use that format to interact with the database. So the query interface where we type the query, so that is a question answer dialog box, another example, right? So queries usually require the user to specify an attribute. So if they're explaining about that, how you do the database queries and all. I hope you have already learned this in the past, right? Under database management systems, you know how you do query selections, projections, joins. So all these are ways of talking to another system, right? So your database is something else. The query interface is an interface where you try to talk to the database. Okay, that's how you have to understand it. Right. So one point here to mention is most query languages do not provide direct confirmation of what was requested, so that the only validation the user has in the result of the search. So the moment you type something, you don't get direct confirmation. Sometimes it goes and processes a lot of things, and you get the response a bit late. Maybe it could be the correct one or the wrong results also. So the effective use of query languages therefore requires some experience. Okay, so one example is in web search engines. Now we are people who type very primitive information, like we type in natural language. But to make more effective use, if you want targeted information to be retrieved, these search engines provide some keywords or some commands are there. Using those commands, you can go to targeted results. right? So that will require some experience and knowledge to use that. Next interaction is form fills and spreadsheets. Form filling, most of the places you are familiar with, even with your BIT registration. Sometimes if you have done online registrations and all, or many other websites also, if you want to subscribe, if you want to sign up for something, the interface provided for you is a form filling interface where you have to type your username, password, your address, email address, telephone number. So that's called form filling. So the user is presented with a display resembling a paper form. So it's like a paper where you have to fill in the slots. Often the form display is based upon an actual form with which the user is familiar, which makes the interface easier to use. The user works through the form, filling in appropriate values. The data are then entered into the application in the correct place. And most of these form filling interfaces allow easy movement around the form and allow some fields to be left blank. Also, when you are designing form filling applications, you need to have some correction facilities. For example, in the case of a NIC number, you have typed the wrong number of characters. You should have a way to inform the user in the same form filling application, uh, like showing a validation message or error message, right? So those kind of things need to be taken into consideration. So it's a very simple interface. I took it from the book. It's a very old one. Now I think you already know the structure of these interfaces. So some advantages they have discussed here. These could be some points for your answers. Advantage. So the dialogue style is useful primarily for data entry applications, easy to learn and use for novice users. It provides something in a simple way. Right. Spreadsheets are similar to form fills, but a sophisticated variation. Right. You know, in spreadsheets, we can still type and fill information. We are basically filling the cells. But in addition, we can also use, formulas. So the knowledge about formulas and when you're changing something, how other areas could change, that is very important when you're providing a spreadsheet type interface to the user. So they have to, so for example, we can design spreadsheet type interfaces using grids. There's a control called grids. So when you provide grids, and a user is coming and typing, so they will type in each of these cells. They have to have an idea when they are typing on something, whether it is only changing that cell or maybe whether it is reflecting changes on somewhere else. For example, there could be a total field, and if the user is typing here, they should be aware that something is changing here. So in that case, maybe you may need to highlight something. If you're changing here, you may need to highlight that something is changing elsewhere in your design, right? So that is what is discussed here. So spreadsheets are an attractive medium for interaction. The user is free to manipulate values at will, and the distinction between input and output is generally blurred. That means sometimes if you don't have these different coloring options to show what is input and output, everything will be looking the same, right? So that is like a limitation in this interface, right? So it makes the interface more flexible and natural. Okay. Next one is the WIMP interface. So windows, icons, menus, and pointers. And is the default interface style for the majority of interactive computer systems, especially in PCs. Examples of WIMP interfaces include Microsoft Windows, IBM for PC compatibles, Mac OS, and various X-Windows-based systems for Unix. Okay. Point and click interfaces. In most multimedia systems and in web browsers, virtually all actions take only a single click of the mouse button. You may point at a city on a map, and when you click, a window opens showing you tourist information about the city. One good example of point and click interfaces is Google Maps or MapPoint. I mean, those kind of applications. You know, you go and search, you go to the relevant map, and maybe just pointing your mouse towards the city, you get additional information. Or maybe you click on that, you get the photos and surrounding information, right? So that interface is point and click. So you don't have to, I mean, that is one area, one place where you can think of. Similar things you can introduce in your software as well, or your web applications as well, where when the user is going and clicking something, like showing a tooltip, some additional information, right? So that is point and click interface. You may point at a word in some text, and when you click, you see a definition of the word. You may point at a recognizable iconic button, and when you click, some action is performed. Now, some websites you might have seen, this is the concept of one example for point and click interface would be now in websites you might have seen hyperlinks. Now, across the words, you may have seen hyperlink. Already you are familiar with hyperlinks, I believe. You may have some words underlined, right, with the link. So that is also an idea behind point and click interface. So instead of to inform some user about what this word is about, mostly you might have noticed on Wikipedia, when you're reading an article on Wikipedia on some topic, a movie or something, you will see hyperlinks, and there are two types of hyperlinks. One is when you click the hyperlink, it goes to another page. There may be some hyperlinks, you just go and point your mouse, it will show you, it will like show you a pop-up. Instead of taking you to the page, it will show a summary of what that word is representing, right? So that is point and click interface. Okay. You may point at a recognizable iconic button, and when you click, some action is performed. Okay. So that is point and click interface. This is more related or closely related to the WIMP style we discussed earlier. It clearly overlaps in the use of buttons, but may also include other WIMP elements. However, the philosophy is simpler and more closely tied to the ideas of hypertext, as I mentioned, right? So that is what is behind that. In addition, the point and click style is not tied to mouse-based interfaces. So same idea is derived, I mean, mostly this is for touchscreen. It is extensively used in touchscreen information system. So in this case, it is often combined with a menu-driven interface. So take the example of ATM machines again. ATM machines, you have point and click and menus. Simply those two type of interfaces are used in that system. The point and click style has been popularized by worldwide web pages which incorporate all the above types of point and click navigation. Highlighted words, maps, and iconic buttons. Finally, 3D interfaces are there. Now, 3D interfaces, introducing this in a screen is a challenging thing, but how do we achieve that? How do we achieve 3D interfaces? Is by showing the controls in a 3D way. That means our 2D controls like buttons, radio buttons and all, we show and display it in a 3D format. So how do we achieve that? By using shading, or we try to give a sculpted image like a stone kind of a appearance. So in that way, it presents to the user that something is in a 3D way. Now mostly this some shiny buttons and all. Instead of one color, we use a shaded color, like maybe the edges of the button is in a light one, and then you make it darker towards the end. These are all ways of impressing the user to indicate that there is something you can interact, right? So for example, they are shown here. I mean, if you have provided a button like this, which is very flat, it may look a little bit odd. But when you give a 3D look like this, it gives this feeling. Okay, buttons in 3D say press me, right? It gives you that feeling. So they are used judiciously. That means wherever using in a good manner. The raised areas are easily identifiable and can be used to highlight active areas. Unfortunately, some interfaces make indiscriminate use of sculptural effects on every text area, border, and menu. So all sense of differentiation is lost. Just because they want to have this appealing nature, if you use 3D more than what is needed in your interface, then it will be also a miss. So use it only at wherever it is needed, wherever that appealing, this where you want the user to come and engage. Now you might have seen most of the websites, you have these advertisements appearing in 3D way. Why they come in 3D ways? For the same reason. They want you to come and click, or maybe they give this jumping effect. They provide this GIF image, like click, 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 offer, offer. They will show you, right? Okay, 30% discount. It will keep on, blinking, right? So the idea is this. So they are using this kind of a technology, or what do you say, not technology, this concept, 3D interface concept, to attract the user. A complex one, apart from using 3D in appearance and all, workspaces are now introduced. Now you have the interface itself, the environment itself changing into 3D. So objects displayed in such systems are usually flat, but are displayed in perspective when at an angle to the viewer and shrink when they are further away. So like you zoom in, zoom out certain things, you can give this animated effects when you're trying to display something. And even in PowerPoint slide transitions, we can introduce that. Now here I haven't used any animations. You might have seen in some PowerPoint slides, when you are moving from one slide to another slide, you can give this 3D animated effect of changing, right? That is another way of giving an attraction. So three-dimensional workspaces give you extra space, but in a more natural way than iconizing windows. Finally, there are virtual reality and information visualization systems where the user can move about within a simulated 3D world. So this is like you already know, virtual reality is where you wear a head-mounted device or a specs kind of a thing, and you go into a different world. That world will appear to you in 3D, right? So that is also another way of interacting with the computer systems. So to summarize, we have discussed about ergonomics and the different interaction styles that are available. So you have to have a understanding about these for your discussion. So based on some questions, you may have to explain why menus are suitable for that scenario, why natural language is suitable for that problem, why point and click is suitable. Like that, you have to match it with the scenario you get in the question. Right? This is the kind of questions that you could expect. Any questions? Now here is a past paper 2016. You can see from what we discussed today. Explain, direct, and this is the very first question. See, I didn't expect this to appear in the first one. Although we have learned other topics at the past, you can't expect the paper to come in that order, right? So first question itself, explain direct and indirect interaction types when you use an application. Give one example for each interaction style, considering a word processing software. Now, if you open Word, based on the word processing software, for example, I just open this. I go to blank document. Now they're asking you to explain in terms of this interface, what are the direct interaction facilities available, what are the indirect interaction facilities that are working. So anybody can explain simply what are the direct interaction things we have here, where user can do something directly and see instant feedback. I type something here. What are the direct interaction arrangements I can do? So that's a question, right? Interaction types. Okay, direct facilities. Direct facility typing word dot. Okay, maybe changing the style. I can directly do that. Okay, that's one thing. What else? All these formatting options, fonts I can change, color. See, as I change, I directly get the feedback, instant feedback. So those are the things you can discuss under this topic. Indirect modes, like that you can give a few more other examples like formatting, changing the paragraph style, whatever you see, whatever you can do with these controls. So you have to have an idea about Word first to answer that question. That is what is expected there. What could be the indirect one is browsing images from internet or in a folder. Yes, that's a good point. Anything else you can say? Indirect ones. So here notice as I type, see what happened. What happened there? As I typed, what happened? Anybody? So that point what I am expecting should be given as an answer for indirect style. So what was that thing that happened when I typed? The one word you can explain. Yes, auto correction, auto spelling correction. Auto spelling correction. Another thing you will notice as I type at the bottom of the thing, auto spelling correction, auto save. Now I haven't saved this document. After you have saved it to some location, so for saving option also you can say maybe the first saving option is a indirect style, but after that you will notice auto save will be working. That's why when your Word is crashing by some reason, you are able to recover the document, right? So those are some points. Can we consider clipart facility as, I mean, those are like detailed examples. Now here, like we don't need to go like that. Yeah, but you can say anything that you can't directly get it from the interface, you can say indirect. So maybe clipart is indirect. Yes, that can be acceptable. So anything that you directly can do and see a change directly, you can put those examples under direct. Right now, if you just look at some of the answers, and I'm just giving this as answers we discussed, right? You can even compare with, it doesn't have to match with the answers, but if you get the general idea, that is fine. So here they are discussing about a dialogue with feedback and control throughout the performance of the task. For example, now if you're opening a font, you click on this, you get the font information. So this is a dialog box, right? So that's what they're talking. Like that, for each and every stuff, you have different dialog boxes. Like changing font size, font colors. Indirect is batch processing. So you have to first explain what is direct interaction, what is indirect interaction. That is first expected. Then you can give the examples from Word of what you are doing. Now here, auto correction, maybe grammar, spelling correction. So that is another one. You get that small wiggly lines, green, red color lines, no? That curved lines. We call wigglies or something, right? So those things, or auto save, you can give. Like that, you can think of any other indirect interactions that are happening, which will give you a good idea. So that is one thing you have to see. Like that, there could be other questions in other past papers. Customization. Okay, this could be a general question, I believe. I'm not sure. But let's see whether you are able to answer. What do you mean by customization? Customization is the method to extend the user interface. How does customization affect the user? Give an example for customization in Office application. So there are two questions here, right? How does customization? Do you know what is customization? For example, first of all, simple explanation of customization. Customization means no. So customization means, in simple words, making the environment or the user interface in a way that satisfy the user, right? Customize. Now you provide a standard interface, but you can go and change something for your needs. For example, now in this Word document, I think I gave you an example earlier also when I was discussing about cultures. When you're targeting cultures, I talked about why we have this idea of themes. Why we have these themes? We need to support every user in the planet, or support their cultures, right? Or support their nature. Now, same thing even in this Word document, if you take, I have used this pencil theme. Right? I can go and change that under options, maybe under, I don't know, advanced or some place where the themes are. Or maybe if I want to have now this, you can see this language feature here, right? In this language feature, by default, the grammar check is set to English. But I want to make sure hereafter, whatever I'm typing, hereafter, it should be checking for UK English. So that is called customization, giving the flexibility for the user, changing the environment for the user's preference. So it can be things like this. It can be the, this page layout we are using here. If I want this page layout in landscape mode, right? This is called customization, right? So this is how you have to understand customization. So how does customization affect the user? So customization gives a kind of a flexibility to the user, and it gives the user to work with the system in a natural way, in a less painful, stressful way. Some of the things you can give under that. Let's see how they have given explanation for that. So similar explanation. Customization gives the user the ability to change certain aspects of the system according to one of a predefined set of profiles in the system. The interface of the system will be more flexible to the user's needs or is user-friendly compared to one without customization. This situation will affect the users to perform better. Okay, it's an extended discussion of what we discussed. So if you understood what is customization, first you have to give that idea. What is customization? It's the facility of changing aspects. Okay. Finally, they asked you to describe this in terms of a office application. So you can take Microsoft Word as an example and maybe explain these features I mentioned, like the language or maybe the theme, right? So users could select different tools from toolbar ribbon according to his or her preference. Now here also, like, I think you can decide what to show, what not to show. Right? So for example, here certain menus are shown. I can hide the ribbon, right? Or I could pin this back. Right? So those are called customization. These kind of flexibilities you can do within the environment. So many examples. You can take any of one of these examples. So here they are talking about toolbars based on old type of office applications. But now you can discuss that in terms of the modern application. So now we don't have toolbars, we have ribbon. So this area is called ribbon in Microsoft Office. So expanding and collapsing the ribbon is a feature you can discuss. Or maybe you can give the example of the language change for the dictionary change, right? So that was the question I had under that. The other ones are the other areas. I hope you all remember these questions also. Go and refer to the notes. You should be able to answer comparisons between short-term and long-term memory. I think third or fourth lecture we learned. We also learned usability, accessibility. Okay, here is one we learned in the last class. Describe what is gulf of execution, gulf of evaluation. Okay. So you already have the information. Gulf of execution is the the gap between what the user wants to do and what the system can support. That's the simple explanation of gulf of execution. What the user wants to do and what the system can support. That is the gulf of execution. Gulf of evaluation means what the system presents to the user and what the system understands. The gap between those two. It's called gulf of evaluation. So in that terms, you have to answer that. And they're asking what are the ways to reduce the gulf in a software system. So you have to provide some points. Improving user interfaces, how to make proximity, all the interaction matters we discussed, you can give it as a point here. So please go and try to answer this in your own words. First answer this, attempt this in your own words, and then maybe compare your answers with the answers they have provided. If there are any variations, or if you have some doubts in your answers not matching with the answers they have provided, you can always reach out to me and clarify. Then I can confirm whether your answer is correct or wrong. Okay. So any questions, any further questions on today's topic?